When houses earn more than jobs. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee, because I'd like to talk about an article that's just been published in The Conversation. When houses earn more than jobs, how we lost control of Australian house prices, and how to get it back. Now, this is a topic I have been discussing for some time, and frankly, I think the obsession with houses in Australia is a big issue. So first off, before we get through that, I want to talk about wages versus houses, everyone, because this is a battle. Now, I got some old ABS data, back when I had to get a PDF to download it, and the wages back in the 1990s. A male in the private sector was earning $550 a week. Female, $440. Now, in November 2020, a bloke in the private sector is earning $1,770 a week, the average. Female, $1,476. Blokes' wages have gone up 322% in 30 years. Female, 335. The girls are kicking the goals, guys. But here's the thing. What about everyone's friend housing? Well, over that same period, housing in Sydney has gone up 565%. Melbourne, 518. Brisbane, 408. Adelaide, 371. Perth, 405. Canberra, 508. Hobart, 519%. Hobart is just going crazy. The supply in Hobart, and I will show you that in a moment. It is just quite drastic, everyone. I'll bring that up. Hobart, house and unit listings. Once this loads up, we can see here the data from SQM. Look at those listings, just have fallen down over the years. People are wanting to make that change to good old Hobart. Apparently the second driest city in Australia. The more you know. I need to get that more you know meme over the footage. And then we have good old Darwin at 336% up. Units have not escaped it at all, everyone. We have a look here. This is the first home buyer affordability. 30% or less of your disposable income, not your gross income. From 30th of the 6th, 2020, it's probably worse now. You can see Brisbane, we still have majority of houses, well, over 60%, say 70% if you're at, 70% income. That's the market that you have access to. Perth, there's 60% you've got access to a portion of the market. But the lower your income, the less that's affordable. Sydney, Greater Hobart, Perth, nothing. Nothing is in it. So it's not affordable to a lot of people, guys. This is a percent of weekly earnings to pay a mortgage that I figured out for average people. It's all in the red. Remember, 30% is stressful. This is based on the gross figures, including tax. So you can't have even worse. For a couple, almost. This is the thing. You can't buy a house as a single person anymore. It has to be a couple, everyone. Australia's changing. Government to the rescue. Now, this has not just happened without the government intervening in the market. Now, they have recently done extra interventions to stimulate the economy. They've been hitting the piñata that is the housing sector, everyone, because, well, it's the wealth effect. It flows through to other parts of the economy. It makes us feel good. The cash rate, well, it's a joke. 0.1%. 3% used to be considered emergency rates. There's some people that are watching the channel that will be old enough to remember when you could actually earn some money off money in the bank. Literally. Here's the thing, guys. You'd put money in the bank and you'd be getting interest, like 5, 6, sometimes even higher interest per annum for just sitting the money there and doing nothing. No risk. Unbelievable. We've had home builder. First home buyer grants up to $88,000, 5% government loan guarantees. Long term, the biggest issue is negative gearing. Negative gearing. It's incentivizing the allocation of resources to the housing sector as a way to mitigate tax. Everyone is doing it. Everyone. Every occupation, from policemen to surgeons and anesthesiologists. Knockout doctors. Someone can correct me later. We can see the effect of it here in building approvals. They've shot up. We also have councils limiting access for developers. We've got the not in my backyard crowd as well, voting for politicians to limit property growth, to keep their properties going. Now, long term, I would argue there are two things that we need to be aware of that are the outcome of these government policies, these interventions into the market. The first is declining economic complexity. This is to do with the complexity of Australia's economy, what we manufacture, what we export. We were going from an ECI ranking of 40 down to over 80. These are countries that are of similar GDP per capita. Their economic complexities have not declined as drastically as Australia's had. This is a markable difference compared to some of the others. And you have to realize, think about this decline in economic complexity, because all of these resources, I would argue, a big chunk of them have gone into property. There's an opportunity cost. Now, this is a term everyone needs to be aware of. It's an economic term. Opportunity costs represent the potential benefit an individual, investor, or business, and I would say a nation, misses out on when choosing one alternative over another. The idea of opportunity cost is a major concept in economics. Now, the argument I would make that due to government incentives to push people towards housing investment to mitigate their tax, we've had an opportunity cost on our nation, which has resulted in a decline in economic complexity over this period. Why would you invest in a business? Why would you struggle to hire people, to put up with all the red tape, the rigmarole, the pain, when you can earn more in a house, everyone? Maybe the only business you need to start up is one of those online YouTube courses. You see the advertise. I bet you I'll put a title in here, housing something in the title. Houses will be in the title, so you're bound to see some spookers telling you their real estate investment course. So, opportunity costs are unseen. They can be easily overlooked if one is not careful. Now, this needs to be, key to all of our education. I think people need to appreciate opportunity cost, because often you'll see people advocate for interventions in the economy and in the market to set an example, to feel good, to make a difference, or we need to show others how we can lead the way. But they completely negate the fact that there's an opportunity cost, and that usually manifests in a decline in our quality of life, in increasing costs of goods and services here in Australia. And it all adds up bit by bit. And we're seeing it now. We're seeing it now in Australia, guys, where, well, look at this, okay? Wage growth is in the gutter, but housing growth, housing affordability is just a joke, okay? Previous generations could easily afford to have a house with one person. Now you need to have a couple. So some of the perks that previous generations enjoyed are not even possible anymore. Those are all also opportunity costs, everyone. So let's have a look at this article in the conversation now with those references. When houses earn more than jobs, how we lost control of Australian house prices and how to get it back. And this is written by Cameron Murray and Josh Ryan Collins. So, real home prices across Australia have climbed 150% since 2000, while real wages have climbed by less than a third. Sydney and Melbourne rank among the most expensive cities in the world. Sydney and Melbourne, everyone. I mean, they're way better cities in other parts. You go to Tokyo, you go to Berlin, you go to Hong Kong. I would argue they're better cities than Sydney and Melbourne. Maybe it's just my bias. I'm not saying Brisbane is, not by any measure. I mean, look at the night. We've got night curfews in parts of Sydney and here in Brisbane. Hong Kong, you could. When I was there, you could just go to the corner store, buy some alcohol, drink, go to the street, party all night. Can tell I went there as a uni student, can't you? Sydney and Melbourne rank among the most expensive in the world. Australia-wide home ownership levels have fallen from 70% to 65% in the last 20 years, and home equity levels have fallen from 80% to 75%. Younger workers have been completely priced out of the major cities. Among those who can afford homes, the increase in household debt-to-income ratios is weighing on consumption and increasingly financial frugality. We are often told the problem lies in supply, We don't have enough homes in the places people want them. And while it's true a reduction in the supply of housing relative to the population will reduce housing per person and increase housing rents, what we are seeing is something different, a growing divergence between rents and the price of housing as a financial asset that's increasing much more quickly. Australia has become something of a world leader in demand-driven home price inflation. Australians have been increasingly buying homes for the purpose of securing financial returns, both capital gains and rental income, in a process often described as financialization of housing, but one that we think can be more accurately thought of as rentarization. How it happened. In a working paper published this morning by the University of Sydney and University College London Institute of Innovation and Public Purpose, we argue rentarization best describes the increasing use of housing to extract land rents in the form of capital gains on property and rents from tenants, a process in which Australia is well advanced. Despite multiple major boom and bust cycles, including Victoria's 1880s land boom and the 1890s recession that followed, land values and home prices were relatively low compared to the total value of economic activity right up to the 1960s. So here's the long-term Australian real price index for housing and construction prices. Well, there you go, guys. Look at that, shooting right up. In contrast, we show real Australian home prices have soared 215% since 1980 and have shown few signs of revision to long-term trends despite brief corrections in 2010 and 2017-2019. The graph shows the rise in home prices has been driven by rising land values rather than construction costs, which have grown at a rate closer to general price inflation. Well, you know, land isn't considered in CPI, in the Reserve Bank's calculations for the Consumer Price Index, because it's considered an investment. It's tempting to ascribe the takeoff in home prices to low interest rates. Low rates enabled households to take out larger mortgages relative to their income. But rates were also low in the 60s, close to rates in the 2010s when home prices were soaring, and didn't much push up prices then. More from the house than the wage. Well, what about the change in employment demographics, where now you have both partners working? So you've got two people to service a mortgage. See, this is the thing. We shouldn't be talking about wages, guys, like individual wages. It should be related to the earning capacity of a household. And if we look back in the 60s, a household was probably one person working, generally the husband. And the wife would be either the homemaker or, the work she'd be doing wouldn't be as much as it is today. So could that have something to play? I wonder if they'll address that, because that's doubled the purchasing power essentially of a family unit, but it's also suppressed wages because the workforce has instantly grown. So low rates appear to be necessary but not a sufficient condition for soaring prices. Among the other things that seem to be needed are increased access to finance, declining public involvement in housing, and tax breaks that reflect the political power of owners. The return to land in the form of capital growth has climbed from around 3.5% of gross domestic product before the 60s to 16.7% of GDP since 2000. It has become so high as to rival and at times dominate wages as a source of household income. The graph below compares the annual return to a typical home over a year with the annual return to labour in the form of a wage, both nationally and for Sydney, where only recent data is available. When the measure is greater than 1, it implies that the average home had a greater return made up of rent and capital gains than the average worker. And here we have Sydney, Melbourne, the ratio of housing total returns to wages. So here you go, housing below, more, 2010 more, and there you go, Sydney more. In 16 of the 29 quarters leading up to June 2019, the median Sydney home earned more than the median full-time worker earned from wages. In Australia, housing is overwhelmingly private owned. For a brief period in the 50s and 60s, public housing was created on a significant scale, but a huge privatization program soon followed, and today it represents just a few % of new supply. Into this environment was thrown the removal of controls on lending from the 80s, enabling banks to expand property-related lending. More credit flowing in a finite supply of land generates a feedback cycle as rising prices and collateral values stimulate more lending and higher prices. Well, we need to increase the supply of land. There's an argument right there, everyone. We don't have a finite supply of land. We've got a huge supply of land. We just need to allow more people to have access to it, guys. In Australia, mortgage lending grew from just 20% of GDP in 1990 to over 80% today. By way of comparison, business lending climbed from 35% to 40%. Well, the banks love their mortgages because there's a real asset tied behind it. You try and be a small business to get a loan and it's a nightmare. So the vast majority of lending is for the purchase of existing rather than new homes. Investors push up prices for everyone. The investor share of new mortgage lending has grown from 10% in the early 90s to 40%. It has given owner-occupiers and first home buyers price competition that they didn't previously have to face. Australia's unusually generous tax concessions for investors helped. They are granted discounts on capital gains tax while being able to deduct the full cost of operating their properties, including interest costs, against income from any source. Where the deductions exceed rental income, the process is known as negative gearing. A lot will need to change in order to shift things. Mortgage credit will need stronger regulation. It may be time to revisit the credit controls used in Australia in the 50s and 60s, which directed investment into new rather than existing housing and helped increase home ownership. The case for a central housing bank. Taxes should focus on land rents in the form of increasing residential property values or windfalls from changing land use. Taxing away future rents would dent speculation. Broadening annual land value taxes to primary residences as well as investor housing would be part of the change, introduced at a low initial rate and with options for delayed payment or borrowing against future sales for those on low incomes. Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that suggestion. We don't want land tax on primary residences. What about instead we allow people, the purchasers of a home, the same benefit as we're giving investors? Let them write off all the interest on their tax. Why not? There's an idea. Well, they put that one forward. They still haven't mentioned the increase in the workforce from the 60s. Tax advantages extended housing investors such as negative gearing and discount capital gains tax should be scrapped. Well, I agree with them there. I think we need to phase out of negative gearing. It's an intervention in the market that's causing this unnatural situation. And there's a case to reintroduce direct government involvement. A central housing bank could use its ability to supply and sell new housing to set a home price corridor to ensure home prices did not rise rapidly and dampen potential falls in prices. It could also be used to provide a variety of alternative stable tenures for households, such as different kinds of renting, public housing, and selling dwellings to social housing providers at discounted prices. Challenging vested interest will be hard, but the current downturn offers hope. As rates of home ownership fall, renters struggle to make ends meet, and central banks run out of leverage to stimulate the economy, with interest rates already at rock bottom, reforms that previously appeared politically impossible might gain traction. So what do you think about their suggestions? Land taxes on primary residence, a central housing bank, and significant government intervention in the market. What do you reckon, guys? I agree with the idea for removing removing negative gearing. I think we need to look at that. Honestly, we really need to step out from that. But we need to honestly and seriously look at the fact that wages should be based on a household, a family unit. That's how people buy houses, traditionally. That really hasn't changed. You work together to buy a house. Now the family unit, as a couple, well, we both have to work, don't we? So what do you all think about that? What are the solutions to when housing earns more? I think there are a few. Long-term, we need to reduce our dependency on property as a way to make profit and to grow our wealth. the issue here in Australia. It's just set up to encourage people to get into property. And there's a lot of political will and power to it. And then both sides of politics use housing to stimulate the market, guys. Don't think one or the other is any different. We need to advocate for local and state government to increase housing supply. We need to make it easier to get approvals, easier to reduce the red tape and burden on developers and people who want to build housing. Don't vote for parties who limit development and construction and fight the NIMBY crowd. I was talking about an inner city Greens councillor here in Brisbane who wanted to put a kibosh, a development out at Ipswich. The constituents in his suburb, his ward, house prices are 1 million plus. This development would be houses around 400 grand. Starter homes, guys. Become politically active. Contact your local members. How are they reducing the cost of housing? Are they getting rid of headworks charges? How are they reducing red tape at a state level? Contact your federal members. Approach minor parties. What are they going to do? Be active in this. Because otherwise you're going to have people that are advocating for more taxes and intervention in the markets. And I don't think it's going to be as rosy as they suspect it will be, because we're not in the 60s anymore, guys. As always, thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you're a fan and enjoy the content I create here. There are a few ways you can support us. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links on Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or AussieBroadband. You can also support us by buying our merch from HeiseSays or Teespring, using Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or via PayPal. Take care, have a great day, and I will see you all next time. Bye for now.